Leave me in the comments on which team you currently play XILONEN.
Huh?
How much is from 1 to 10 your degree of satisfaction? With a character, as if it were a survey for overseas. And I give you 30 proto-gamers. And today we are going to watch a video that even by on top of the build and first impressions had a lot of desire to bring. And it is all the teams that improves XILONEN. I have a list of more than 10 teams where I want to tell you everything I have been able to try these days in about 20 hours. XILONEN's test stream totals, and I've been able to test it on 90% of all the teams you're watching and the rest. There's a lot of content on YouTube so we can draw conclusions, and today we're going to see XILONEN playing properly. Because today there are still people who don't know how to read XILONEN's set, and who don't know how to apply the buffo of elementary damage. But if you see the build, you will solve that, and you will see how powerful XILONEN is. All the teams where XILONEN brings improves some mentions to the C2, but very subtle since everyone understands. I'll play it mainly Chero, and it's the important thing to study in this video. I'll explain where it does get better, where it's best in slot, where it can get better in what situation, where you can replace a character you may not have, because it can work very well, not only instead of Xiang too. Those who don't have Xiang because you haven't rerun this character yet, and all this thanks to the channel team. So today, I really want to thank the editors, the channel team, and the people who have held me accountable, for example, with Navia that I don't have it to prove XILONEN and see the difference of damage. So, thanks to you, thanks to the community, and now you do leave a good like a good alt video, and subscribe you leave a good comment for the algorithm. Thanks for enjoying and watching the video and channel. Welcome, and guests to the live shows. You know it's not hard to give like and subscribe with bell. Support's a lot totally free, makes the video recommend and position itself, and this video can see many more people. I'm sure the video of XILONEN's best teams along with the will is going to explode in an exponential way, so in advance I thank you, and now we're going with everyone's team list. If I'm missing a team, please help me with the comments.
Huh?
Well, let's start with a very clear and very simple team.
Huh?
I'm going to camp you until you learn stream. I'm here recording a video. If you see yourself in the video, then there you are. I hope people do not come while I am recording and writing the Twitch chat for to appear here in the video, because it will fill this up with good, or it would be fun. First team thing that happens. First team DIM. Let us talk about Raiden Denize. It is very simple to separate and explain when in the Raiden hypercarry would work best. And at Raiden National, I'm not going to explain at all when XILONEN could go, because he could go at Raiden National. XILONEN instead of Bennett, but it would be minimally uncomfortable since we have to try. So to say, let's say crystallizing both Xiangling's Pyro and Raiden's Electro CACs too. And in the case of Raiden National, I could release you a Bennett playing XILONEN, but it would be slightly complicated. The Raiden hypercarry is the team that could really benefit. Well, today the most played variant and the ceiling. Raiden hypercarry is Raiden Sara Kazuha Bennett. There is a very powerful and very interesting sub-variant. It's his second best alternative with Chevrus instead of Kazuha, who does it very well and doesn't need to have any constellations, because it doesn't even apply Chevrus's GX well. But here's XILONEN. As in the Raiden hypercarry team, the damage you do mostly if it is within 8 seconds of Kazuha and melee. The cut, XILONEN will not only subtract the issue of being able to gather enemies, but even if the buffos last a little longer. Literally carrying double heating is not so interesting because Raiden has resistance to interruption and Bennett you. And besides the damage that XILONEN could give you sustained, that this we will comment on in much of the rest of the teams. Because XILONEN, if one thing you have about Kazuha, is not only healing but buffos last longer. And this I will repeat in the Raiden hypercarry does not apply in every way possible. So the Raiden hypercarry. Chero is still better with Kazuha, but you have a second and a third variant that approach him incredibly well with that. Chevrois and XILONEN Donegao. To close this team, the Raiden hypercarry has acquired a new roof, and if we talk about XILONEN, C2. That's going to give Raiden 25 points of energy and Sarah that doesn't add up to any damage, but we also add that it's going to give us. That 6 seconds of cooldown reduction turns Raiden Hypercarry into a 20-second rotation team because the last Zara has 20 to a 15-second rotation team. With the same damage as Kazuha, can't get it, and same damage as. Applied in 20 seconds, reduced to 15 seconds, means greater DPS, with which the new roof of the Raiden Hypercarry would be Raiden. Zara XILONEN C2 and Bini, but it is as a tip for the C2. If it is Chero in Hypercarry, you can play calmly Kazuha and Chevrus. And XILONEN is one more alternative next to them that gives you one of the best ceilings, but I keep recommending Kazuha is more useful together and does more interesting things than XILONEN on this team. Next team and I will try to go fast because if I don't know how long the video will last, I leave the comments when you are watching this video at this minute how long it is, lasting at the end in total, because I don't know how long it's going to last, and I want to go with every team fast. The next team we're going to talk about are the Agravites in general without Hyper Bloom. Now I'm talking about the Hyper Blooms, because there would be a team where you can fit well with XILONEN. The Agravites had a pure team variant of Agravites that is played a lot besides that are Keiching and Chlorind and the best in slot. Although more variants are played would be Keiching, that you will be watching it on screen thanks to editors because they are representing each video in a very good way. Keiching, Nahida, Fischler, and Kazuha Day. This team has surely seen him a lot and has been repeated quite as one of the best. Chlorind and Keiching teams are mainly a pure team of Agravites, and surely you have also seen it with Samai variant carrying Kerara instead of Nahida to have a shield and survive because it's a team that basically doesn't have. Well, we give gentlemen in these teams and variants of Agravites that are not very popular nor played. Yes, we have it. Nahida, Fischl, and instead of Kazuha, let's get XILONEN, who gives you the heating of the team you don't have with Kazuha. Bursting and quiet because Keiching does, or Chlorind does, very good damage in area, and besides Nahida to enemies in area. Also applies them perfectly, with which the need to put together is not so great. So specifically with Agravite, new roof with XILONEN, and whoever played this team that aren't many people now can. Put XILONEN instead of Kazuha, and has a pure Agravite core with Keiching with Chlorind, or with some Trokar and Petiska. Next team, and here I think a lot of people will say, hey Phil, I wanted to be watching this video for Sev's Hutao min Hutao. Please invoke Tao in the comments, put XILONEN. Sev Hutao in the comments as friends. Yes, of Hutao. There are 80,000 variants of teams, but let's talk about the current. More played of his best in slot and his maximum damage by rotation, plus a very nice team visually in his gameplay than... It's the Hutao Double Hydro Xianyun Dante. You can also play Hutao, Yelan Xingqiu, Kazuha. Here you don't have Furina, and neither do you want a healer, and Hutao has a good sustain along with Xingqiu, which is micro healing, recent interruption, and things that you already know of Xingqiu the oldest. Summary. If we put in the Hutao Furina Yelan Xianyun, we have the current best in slot and the highest roof of Hutao. It's basically a gameplay that you already know is two normals. A loaded downward jump. You can do this between 5 and 7 times according to your level of gameplay, and it is very interesting and very powerful, the team. When does it get better with XILONEN? Well, there is a new rotation with this team that if you throw the ulti of Hutao at the beginning of the rotation, as it has 15 seconds of cooldown, you will have it in the rotation when you go back in, with which nothing happens and you don't lose anything. You start by throwing away Hutao's ulti. You throw out XILONEN's combo to apply the elementary damage rise to Hutao. Then the combo of the rest of the team, and basically you have the same team but with XILONEN instead of Xianyun. That gives you the Xianyun. Dragon Hunter plus the Green Shadow to the Hydro, which is the damage of Furina and Yelan. Does it improve or not improve? Here's interesting what we have concluded against only one enemy, and since the Bufo of Descendings of Xianyun also remains against a single enemy, and the damage of Yelan specifically is also against a single enemy. Besides that, Hutao specifically is also like easier to apply your damage against an enemy because you can. One loaded to 2 enemies, but A, you may not police both because they are not applied by Hydro. B, that maybe you can put them in line to plug in a load of 2, and maybe one is here and another is leaving. Basically against a single enemy who is in fact Hutao's core is still better Xianyun. In this particular case, but XILONEN with everything to 0 has a small niche with Hutao where against several enemies is better. Since Xianyun gives you the buff against an enemy, but XILONEN gives you the bonus to Hutao, or to Hydros and low resistances. In general to all, with which against several enemies and to 0 XILONEN would be better than Xianyun. But here comes again, the same old and quiet teams that there are many teams where XILONEN busts Kazuha or other characters IMA. and brings you 45% of life to Hu Tao is the new best in slot, and XILONEN in C2 would be better than XILONEN C2 against almost all enemies and practically equal against a single enemy, as XILONEN gives you the bonus down against a single enemy, but technically having the same damage in unit target and more damage in multi-target. XILONEN in C2 would be better for the Hu Tao team. New roof, new best in slot, but Chero is a variant with a rate and hypercarry, but would recommend even more to XILONEN, especially to Chero, all against an enemy next Team Cakes and Ayato, i.e. International, i.e. Tartaglia, Kazuha, Xiangling Bennett, or the same thing but with Ayato instead of Tartaglia. Well, here's XILONEN something similar. You prefer to put together Kazuha. You prefer that I reapplied Kazuha element and also insert the green shadow. Both elements makes it more comfortable Kazuha. So as you can see, I've put them at the beginning of the teams that can be played with XILONEN. But it's not the best either over Kazuha, because finally Kazuha's timing is to say the 8 seconds of elementary damage bonus and the 10 seconds. Green shadow on this team also, let's say they match decent. Even though Xiangling has 20 seconds, really remember that in this team it is necessary to keep well the timing of Tartaglia, and then not to have 80 billion cooldowns in the daggers. So Kazuha in this particular team with both Ayato and Tartaglia is still slightly better, but whoever wants so, release a Kazuha can put XILONEN up here. Teams that I recommend a Kazuha with a last honorary mention of. The teams are better Kazuha than XILONEN, because now comes the good friends along with the permafrost. The following mention. Honorific is permafrost in permafrost. You can also play XILONEN, and I am not talking about the AC2. Remember that all this is done. Zero and I make references to the ACE2, but not at all in permafrost. The core team currently where we're going to explain the performance is Ayaka. Sheng is the best permafrost in the game, and you can put Rivesly instead of Ayaka with Furina and XILONEN, because you can now activate the fake damage of Furina and you can pass the Dragon Hunter from XILONEN to Ayaka. Is currently the best permafrost. Neither Kokomi Katsuha nor things like that. You have a very superior roof, and you play much more. You could play XILONEN instead of Xian. Even if XILONEN improves with the green shadow of Cryo for Ayaka and the Dragon Hunter, what happens to Ayaka? More or less not. To XILONEN on this team, and if we talk about the other subvariate, that would be Ayaka Kokomi Kazuha Sheng, or Mona, instead of Kokomi. If you don't want heating because you're very good, basically the same with Kazuha, but Kazuha also reapply element Cryo or Hydro, according to how it is rotation, to be able to continue to have frozen enemies, with which again and last mention. Honoring a team that is not so much played here, would recommend more to Kazuha or XILONEN in permafrost, but you can play XILONEN. So interesting now if friends teams where XILONEN could become better, where XILONEN's forgiveness could come to be better, but especially teams that have won a new roof, and really that sometimes, and without continuing to count the C2 surprises me. NATLAN's power creep, but I think it's a natural thing to sell, as I explained earlier. Well, let's talk about Navia. Navia, his current core is Navia Albedo bar Kiori. But if now better Albedo only makes one, and with weapon, Navia Albedo Furina. Bennett and you can play XILONEN instead of Furina, and you have Pyro Consonance. But honestly, XILONEN there is a part if it gives you the Pyro Consonance for the attack, but does not give energy to the team, does not give you the inflicted bonus that Furina gives you as sub DPS. Does the same or as damage as Furina because it doesn't vaporize. So this is already a personal point of view, but I don't understand it. People who can play Furina play XILONEN with the Navia team, but yes online, and can do their job well about. This core XILONEN improves Albedo to Kiori. The first thing to explain is that it is interesting, since their XILONEN is a buffer to Navia. It's not a sub DPS like Kiori or Albedo in easy reason, means that their XILONEN doesn't leave you as a source of continuous damage, as Albedo Kiori would do with what you can't wait for Navia's ulti after Bennett's ulti to do snapshots. With the ulti of Navia, something simple to understand that it is the snapshot for the new ones is when you throw an ulti into having an important bufo, in this case as an example of Bennett's bufo, that the ulti receives the bonuses from that bufo if you throw the ulti of Navia at the beginning of the rotation to apply Geo for the crystallized ones of the Navia itself, outside of the ulti of Bennett. You're doing less damage, and this is interesting to explain why, because the sub DPS, let's say a 0 Albedo versus XILONEN. 0 could get closer, and here the calculation would be if the ship itself compensates the damage with its ulti damage and its damage of the shotguns with the 2 bufos of XILONEN, that would be 40% elemental damage Geo, and the lower resistances Geo. And the answer is yes, but by little, but by so little that let's say the only incentive that can come to see And I know that people for this already directly will prefer XILONEN, and I recommend it, because it's more damage objectively by very little, but it's more damage is that you're going to make bigger numbers with the cannon if friends, this is what people look for in Genshin. Bigger numbers make larger numbers if objectively the damage compensates for very little if the rotation does it correctly. If important data, XILONEN does not leave a stable or large source of geo, so that Navia has loads when entering the field for. Put in a gun with which Navia must throw the ulti before Bennett's ulti, and not later as you can with Albedo or Kiori. If with which care and you have to learn and understand how Navia works with the 6 loads and the crystallized but objectively. XILONEN best in slot of Navia, and also with the C2 that gives you 50% damage. Inflicted Geo new roof of Navia, congratulations. May Navia, because XILONEN has come to the element literally with the most played. Carry Geo Riosley. Riosley is interesting. And tell me Riosley played with XILONEN as you could play with XILONEN. Replacing Bennett and without a team of Permafrost means if you're not playing Riosley Permafrost, that would fall into the category explained with Ayaka. But continue it, being better Ayaka to enemies who say they can eat all the ulti of Ayaka, Riosley could be played with XILONEN. If you play Riosley Nahida or Emily Xiangling, and put XILONEN instead of Bennett because you can punch Riosley. To apply Creo, enter with XILONEN to do the bonus elemental damage by the set, and then apply the buffos by pulling the buffos. Ulti everything else, and Riosley can play reverse melt over burn. What difference it would make with Bennett as reality? Is that surprising? But they are quite similar, since here you could play, for example, or a Nahida Dragon Hunter. To compensate Riosley, but carrying the triple mastery to apply the buffo and the sub DPS damage he would lose is not so much honestly, but if we talk about playing Emily, who benefits from Bennett's attack, then in that case Emily prefers. Play Bennett instead of XILONEN, but the strange team of Riosley, Nahida, Xiangling, XILONEN, because in this case you have a new hypothetical and simple roof that I don't think many people play the truth of Riosley, and know why here I think. Personally, in the video, and I think many will share it, I think it can become an absolute truth. I think, of course, for the fact of the charges of noctambulism in all the teams where I mentioned that perhaps there is a Xiangling, surely when put Mavuika will improve even more in all these teams where you could put Mavuika instead of Xiangling and have much more energy with XILONEN due to the loads of Nightism. Burst noctambulism is very likely that these teams new have a little more roof, so here I mention, or if it's a team that will not play many people but with Mavuika. You can improve next team if you don't have your current core, which is also played with Chlorind, which is Furina Nahida's but Baiju XILONEN can be played instead of Baiju, who gives us the buffs to reactions and gives us a Dragon Hunter a lot. People can't get to play Dragon Hunter in Baiju on this team because they don't get enough recharge in Baiju and Deju. Not many people have the cone of Baiju that gives you 2 elemental double particles inside, so that Baiju has permulti in. Zoomerises then XILONEN Chero here, opposite Baiju Chero or XILONEN CT Iwo, opposite Baiju Cone, improves it, as the reality is that surprisingly, although we lost the consonants of Hendro that gives us 100 master's degree, could get to improve concretely here in this case. If we carry a weapon that buffets us to the team, in this case not the Favonius, but for example the weapon of Kazuha that gives us that elemental damage bonus and that 20% attack XILONEN, if we talk about Baiju not carrying Dragon Hunter because he didn't, it's got the cone, even though there are people who with Chero can get Dragon Hunters will give us more damage to the team than the Baiju himself, although we lose the consonants of Hey already. I say, if we have the weapon of Kazuha XILONEN that gives us 20% of attack and 25% of normal and charged attacks, because it lowers electro resistance because the rotation can be done by starting. And then Furina Nahida and you enter with butt to the field to burst, and the cooldown of the P. Elemental resets and you have a, let's say, in quotation marks, new ceiling, if very curious the truth, and with C2 that will reduce use. The cooldown of ifs making the team otherwise become a team of 15 seconds, curiously more. Yet, this I didn't expect. It is very curious from Encinos who are little, but again there's a new roof in, but you already know the BA. Ceilings that can reach if you combine it with the C2 of Furina, the C2 of Nahida, and if not Chero with next character weapon. Funny that it has surprised me a lot, and that it seems that no, but it can improve gaming, and to whom the change is walking the attack of off. Bennett the Xianyon downhill, Furina Bufo that applies Hydro so you can vaporize as well. The gaming is curious. And it's got a lot of parallelism conjugated, and you'll be telling me that it takes 20 minutes of video, and you haven't talked about Arlecchino. And you haven't talked about Nouvellette because the best thing is for the end. Now I'm going to talk about Arlecchino and Nouvellette gaming. What about? Gaming then well gaming receives the downing bufo with Cheyenne, if we talk about Xianyun Chero, and we put in this case XILONEN. Instead of Xianyun, the damage uni target changing the damage of descents, and the rotation minimally broken passing the hunt of hot dragons from Xianyun to gaming, considering that on that particular team you already know how we explained at the time and not just but many creators talk about the same subject. And it's that they nerfied, let's say, the power to make the whirlwind pyro with Xianyun, so that our friend gaming will benefit from the green shadow, with which he usually wears more. Our old-fashioned and green shadow. In Xianyun, it makes us that XILONEN perfectly activates the low of resistances that gives us perfectly the pyro to gaming. And that makes gaming can vaporize then take XILONEN instead of Xianyun. Let's say break the chain of making Altanal. 2 elemental downfall jump with the controllable scaled with a normal attack and simply disables those downhills. But it lets us do the normal gaming combo by ensuring Furina applies to make sure we vaporize that much. People don't know how to expect the right frames to vaporize all the strokes of gaming, and curiously just like Hu Tao does. Zero can get us to hit a single enemy, a team that practically approaches his sweaty Xianyun by XILONEN. But it is that Chero against several enemies, and specifically gaming, that can vaporize perfectly against several enemies. Much better than Hu Tao, because Furina has several kits that apply in area to 0 against many enemies. XILONEN improves US, both in comfort, especially in rotation, but to multi-target in total damage. The damage of gaming, but is that above C2 Desi and Yun? Yes. That already gives us a roof against a very superior enemy with gaming, but in multi-target with the 45% extra attack that will give us gaming as if he were the Dragon Hunter, makes against many enemies XILONEN C2 US. Gives a new roof with gaming against a single enemy, and C2 has the upper ceiling Xianyun. Very curious. The rotation is a bit there, because even if in the future you don't carry Dragon Hunters and carry Xianyun's own weapon, then you no longer have that. You break the rotation, and you can first throw the Xianyun combo with his weapon, and they're old-fashioned, and then leave Bennett so that be longer in the field, and this is the natural rotation of without breaking it by the Dragon Hunter. Remember that you have to, after Xianyun, enter with gaming, which is not Xianyun Bennett gaming, but Bennett Xianyun gaming, and you lose many seconds. About Bennett's ulti and the green shadow that I explained before, and you'll say how complicated this is, that he's saying let him talk. In Chinese you see how you are the CEO, that you speak in Chinese, not in the teams of gaming. I explain it well, basically has different rotations, depending on whether you use Dragon Hunter or if you feel like activating the green shadow. That is very complicated with what I recommend. They're old-fashioned and no one's ever spoken for that team. So if I found it several enemies to CDR to C2 again, gaming ceiling curiously changing the descending roof bufo from Xianyun C2 and arming against a single upper enemy. But very few people have Xianyun C2 and next weapon team me in mind. And you'll tell me if you're going to talk about Arlecchino and New Bennett. I'm going to found you on Twitter and Facebook, and you look at it, said that NATLAN in Spain, and now it took me and mine no better is strange. But I don't get better anymore, because I and my difference from Hu Tao that heals and can hurt if you can play a core of me, and Mia Furina Yelan Bennett saying that Hu Tao could also play. But I already say it is a very uncomfortable core, for Hu Tao has more roof with the Xianyun because it can descend, and I call myself with descending, with which against only one enemy and against several is impossible, because me and mine is archery, and mine doesn't get better with XILONEN and a bonus track too. Liney, there isn't now that we're going to found Phil like that. Lena and you wanted to talk about Arlecchino. Liney has a very frantic 15-second rotation that takes advantage of Katsuha's buffs, with which the sustained 20-second damage that XILONEN can give us is also not as interesting for Liney, with which Liney as well as me and mine could play. Liney, i.e., you could play XILONEN instead of Kazuha. But the Bennett Kazuha Furinina Liney's Liney burst core team rotation 15 seconds, very frantic and very fast remains. Better now Noivillet and Arlecchino. If calm friends, well, Arlecchino is very interesting because a very circumstantial thing happens. And this surprised me, and I didn't think it could happen, but if it's very important and if it's very solid XILONEN, but they happen. Two things against a single enemy, okay, but Arlecchino, when you are playing against several enemies, you can vaporize in area. By the hydro application of Furina and Kazuha, and above all with Arlecchino C2, that the first hit that jumps those who have Arlecchino C2 After the first charge vaporizes and is in area, and it is much damage, it turns out that if you, after throwing elemental ulti of Furina, you throw the ulti of Kazuha, so that it will also put Hydro, and then already ulti of Bennett, and elemental of Kazuha for green shade. To pyro with Bennett's ulti, you have all the well-executed buffos on Arlecchino, however, with XILONEN you have no way. Like Kazuha imbuing you with Hydro, so that at least with the C2, the first blow, and 1 in 3 normal vaporizes then. With Arlecchino Chero that you don't care so much to vaporize 1 in 3 strokes, and if you can do it with Furina, and you don't have the C2 hit against several enemies that you're going to better apply, all this, XILONEN is coming again a lot closer to Kazuha. It would be a second best option against an enemy, something similar because you still prefer to do all this, and in the specific case of Arlecchino, I for comfort will continue to recommend Kazuha both to gather and above all for this type of rotation. To be imbued with Hydro with Kazuha to be able to do all this correctly, but if your Arlecchino is not C2 and that first C2 hit that vaporizes in area is not so important to you because it is not C2, so XILONEN can do a job. Similar to Kazuha, and release a Kazuha for another team, and play Arlecchino, Furina, XILONEN, and Bennett perfectly now Neuvillette. This is interesting. Neuvillette has lots of equipment, but has 2 very powerful equipments that are an electrocharged. Puro with Kazuha, Kuki, Furina, where go triple mastery Kazuha and Kuki, and electrocharged enabled by them have an incredible power because the scale of electrocharged by the mastery itself, and the multitasking damage is gigantic. And then, Neuvillette has a team apart from the Hyperloon with Nahida Kuki, has a Baiju team where Baiju is played with Katsuha used for the team and the Bloom Core that I don't recommend that team because quite useful the truth and aside so, by the Jilin of Baiju to activate loads of Furina, and many people who play Furina Chero that with C2 you know that activates loads faster than if you play this Baiju team because it is the fastest core that activates and the most active loads of Furina Chero and can. Let's say something artificial damage from Neuvillette faster because well XILONEN in this case that obviously gives us a lot more. Buffos that Baiju enables us the Neuvillette, Furina, Kazuha, XILONEN. This team has a pretty interesting story. I understood the kit well, and in the first impression video was XILONEN's kit. The Rao has said a bad thing. Fun the mini, and in this case the equipment does work because if it activates 2 loads of the same element, and in that video who has seen it? Because the mini funitors and the haters for not watching the entire videos just come to look, said one thing. Let's get it out. Context, but nothing happens. Internet is so life is like this, because in the same video I say capable yes, that activated loads 2 different elements, but people who watched the full videos and could watch that and said good normal, and people who don't put mini. That against several enemies, the Electro team loaded with Kazuha Kuki, or some wild hobby out there gives us a multitasking damage. Very strong, but to Neuvillette the loaded already plugs it multitasking, or you already put a loaded to the enemies that you want. I mean, you're already doing multitasking damage with Neuvillette's damage. It's so wildly high even though it's all 0. Is made 1 even if Furina is at Chero that is C2. That only the fact that a silo on the team will even more damage you. Brutus of Neuvillette, plus Furina Buffos, plus Katsuha Buffos. If you enable us a new Hydro Monkey with a new roof, Neuvillette and a possible new team of the game, and here again Norifica mention to the C2 of XILONEN. If we get C2 of XILONEN, and then we have Kazuha Chero because the C2 gives us 8% more elemental damage. We have Furina C2, Neuvillette Cone, and B. If the C2 that gives us 45% of life to Neuvillette and Furina, ladies and gentlemen, the icing of the cake in this video, we have a new best team of the game with XILONEN C2, and competing between the 3 best circumstances and constellations. Game teams XILONEN, Chero, Katsuha, Furina, Neuvillette. So ladies and gentlemen, if you don't just come to play at 12 of us, 13 more teams that are missing me because I will be forgetting some, but right now if they come to give a new ceiling 1 better game equipment, and if none is inside and on new roofs of approximately 4 or 5 inside. Of the top 10 teams in the game is a game changer, and where it is not the best in slot, almost 8 of 10 teams can be the second or 3rd best alternative to all the teams in the game, so little more than joy, and what a fucking change for that in. Without impact has been XILONEN, and especially in the grandfather, the Men Geo, because Geo has revived with XILONEN. Little more to leave a good luck at it. I'll tell you, subscribe, you leave a good comment for the algorithm. Thanks for enjoying and watching the video, and day. I was really impressed by how they've been able to balance a character this way without it being abusive, artificial or unreal, and yet everyone likes it by design, by exploration, but above all, by what the combat. That's a big part of the game, and it's been a good job, just like when Mini Mignon Seda 5.1 is empty-is. Zumo, when doing a good job, is appreciated and valued, so incredible XILONEN. No, El Skype are people little more alike. I said leave a good like a good ulti, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's free to subscribe with bell, helps a lot. Positions. Recommends the video, we grow. Thanks from all the team of the channel. Take care, to have very good day, and bye.